Welcome everyone. Thank you for attending my talk. This is Security Microservices with Microprofile and Okta in under 40 minutes, hopefully, if everything goes okay. So let's start with introductions. My name is Fabio Turizo. I am Service Manager at Payara. We are a small company on the UK. We'll talk about us in a bit. I am from Colombia. I had difficulties traveling due to the tropical storm. So it was a fun anecdote that I think many people will share over the weekend. And you can find me on Twitter and Fab Turizo. I don't tweet that much. I follow a lot of people and a lot of technology, so be my guest if you want to follow me. So Payara is basically, we are a company that we developed a product that is the evolution of Glassfish, which has been the standard reference implementation of Jakarta EE, which was formerly known as Java Enterprise Edition. We are part of the Eclipse Foundation. We are a solutions member because we support both Jakarta EE as a technology, as a working group partner, and we contribute to the specifications, and we also co-develop in other specifications for the Microprofile, Eclipse Microprofile implementations as well, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. We are also part of the committee member of Jakarta EE, the Enterprise Edition for Java projects, or E4J, which is the governing body of the entire thing. So our start product is Payara Platform Enterprise, which is just a commercial supported version of Payara Server and Payara Platform itself, which is just middleware. For any company that has Java developers, that they are willing to invest in Jakarta as a technology, and that they are offering services in multiple industries like finance, e-commerce, etc. Our two, let's say, best representations of the technology is Payara Server Enterprise, which is, the traditional application server that you can install in whatever environment you want to use. It also has Docker compatibility for, modern cloud developments. And we also have Payara Micro Enterprise, which is a jar that you can launch from the command line, much developer friendly, much cloud native friendly. You can use it in many environments because we also support Docker, Kubernetes, and other infrastructures as well. So, but again, we are an open source company, and the point of open source is not just simply charging everyone money and see how everything goes, but the intention is to encourage the community to come to our site, to see our products, to believe that whatever we are doing is actually helping each other grow. And the intention is that we have a community offering that is built on focusing, let's say, that aspect of developing and innovating applications, because the point is not to get stuck in the past. Things have changed over Java, and I'm sure that you will hear it from Venkat on his talk at the end of the day. But the intention is that Java has changed a lot, and Java Enterprise and its ecosystem has changed a lot, and the intention is not to get stuck on closed source software that people are reluctant to use, but rather just simply see what's open, see how's the code, and see how people contribute to it. And if businesses grow, companies grow, invest on it. Give us money, we'll keep each other back, and the idea is to see where we go. So, now on to the talk. The self-promotion part is over, so you can arrest. Security is hard. And I'm going to ask this question just to check, but how many of you are responsible for maintaining a database of user identities on your businesses or on your corporations? None? Just one? Okay. I see one, I see two. Security is hard, and I'm sure that the people who raise their hand have trouble sleeping at night sometimes because, yes, absolutely, managing or safely managing user identities is the main concern of this part of the role. Making sure that not only your database doesn't get compromised by bad actors in any way, but that you're also making sure that your users are effectively, let's say, and safely managing their identities, making sure that they're using same passwords, that the passwords that they're using are strong enough, that they're renovating those passwords, let's say, regularly. It's something that they're doing, and that is part of your job description, making sure that they are able to properly, let's say, adopt your practices in a sense, because you don't want to force users. If you try to force users to follow your practices, they might get tired, and the usual, let's say, IT user, let's say they are not adamant on following proper practices unless strictly necessary. Another concern is securing microservices with minimal risk, because whenever you develop microservices, remember that you're developing the smallest unit of possible work or the smallest component that your application will interact with. And this small component needs to have better security or the same level of security as other components in your application infrastructure. So it is extremely important that this redundancy of securing each microservice component is built in a strong manner. And performance impact is the other, let's say, aspect of this. So you have to make sure now that you're developing microservices, or if you are developing microservices, how do you properly manage the performance impact on high availability environments? Making sure that if you have a distributed environment with multiple microservice clusters, all of these clusters are properly tending to high throughput, to high performance for securing or for securing requests, or making sure they're authenticating identities or authorizing identities. The solution to this is to rely on an identity platform solution. And again, I say solution in a sense because this is exactly the concept. It's not a silver bullet. There are, of course, some caveats with this. But the important thing is that all of these concepts that I described have already been implemented. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start implementing a user management solution, a password sanitization algorithm, or some, let's say, mechanisms to properly validate that your identities or your user identities haven't been hacked in any way. All of these, let's say, solutions I have already designed and have already thought about these problems, and they have solved for you. And there are many solutions on the marketing, but I've chosen these four, Auth0 and Okta, which are fairly known services on the web that you can just simply go to the page, sign up an account, a free account, start using the service, and see how you go. And if the intention is your business grow and you have a really big need for an identity solution, then just simply give them money and start having a proper enterprise support contract with them and seeing how that goes. However, that doesn't mean that you have to go with an established service. You can also use a solution on your own network or on your own infrastructure. And ForceRock and Keycloak are two really good solutions. Keycloak is open source, ForceRock is open core in a sense, but the intention is that you can just simply download those solutions, implement it in your infrastructure, and you don't have to depend on a third-party service. Because again, and I say this with a big, let's say, maybe every now and then you can hear that even the biggest companies can get compromised. And that's something that will never change, even if you, let's say, trust your money and your data with a company. You don't have an absolute 100% guarantee that these guys really won't get compromised in any way. It's a gamble that you do. But again, it's a big gamble because these companies are already tailoring with these challenges every day. That's something that you don't have to start from scratch. So, why I choose Okta? No, really, no strong reason. I actually have this talk with Auth0 as well. Auth0 was bought by Okta last year, so that talk kind of got redundant. The two services are still separate, but they're mainly part of the same thing and follow the same philosophy. And I also have a talk with Keycloak, so I kind of rotate these talks out. But I always like to talk about the services because it's always good to do some healthy promotion. So Okta is a stable service, it's supported, they have 24/7 support, so if you have any problems, you can call a phone line any time of the day if you're struggling with something. They are fully OpenID compatible, OpenID, which is the standard of the security measures that we're going to review in this talk. It has to be certified, and these guys already have covered that requirement. They have a multitude of features. I couldn't even summarize them, but between those are multi-factor authentication support, social login, self-registration, etc. It's very easy to use. As I will show you, it's just a simple dashboard that it doesn't require or has a huge learning curve. Anyone can start creating anyone can create an account and start managing their domains and tenants using Okta. Again, not a silver bullet. It can be that tomorrow Okta will get hacked, and this will make me look bad for even promoting the service at this talk. But the intention is that you don't have to rely on the service itself. You can just simply switch out. If your security solution gets compromised, nothing prevents you from grabbing that data, taking your data elsewhere, or maybe even implementing or designing or using one of the open source solutions on the market and bringing everything in-house, because that's the good of it, that you have the options. Now, microservices usually relate on stateless communication. The idea is that every request should be idempotent. Whenever you execute a request, the data and the security context must always be provided within that request, and you always get a response. Either that request gets authenticated and authorized, and you get a valid response, or the authorization failed, and the user is not allowed to do something, or you couldn't verify the identity of that user, and you are trying to get a breach. In any case, or the usual, a user got a password wrong or something similar to that. And the intention is that every security mechanism should do that validation separately for every request that you do. And that security context propagation must be done in one span, because again, microservices are multiple components that instead of the big monolith where a request is processed only once in an application, when you are designing microservices, they will communicate with each other. So the request will get passed over every component in the change. And every component in the change is responsible for validating that security context every part of the journey, in a sense. So a good solution to do this, because again, the intention is not to reinvent the wheel, is to use JSON Web Tokens, which is a standard technology. And the intention that JSON Web Tokens is nothing new. You probably have heard about that before. JSON Web Tokens are just simply a JSON Web Token is just a simple payload in JSON that contains three parts. Let's say an algorithm configuration, a signature, a cryptographic signature of the payload itself, and a body that contains the token, let's say, access information. Who is trying to access the information that you are validating, whether that user has an identity that is currently valid or it has expired, and what groups or roles that user belongs to, because the intention is not just to authenticate that user, but to make sure that that user is authorized to do what they are attempting to do. So this is not new. This is a standard based on an RFC 7519. I won't go into details because, again, it is fairly popular online and you can get any information about anywhere. And the intention is that since it's a standard, it relies on a set of standard claims that anyone can just simply validate. You can code your application, making sure that if you receive a JSON Web Token, you are sure what you're getting. And JSON Web Token is supported on top of OpenID Connect, which is an interoperable authentication protocol. The idea is that OpenID Connect is just a big body of standards that explicitly state how an identity solution will interact with both applications and services that consume the data that they host in a secure manner, because the intention is that this is not a protocol designed just to, allow the applications to just simply exchange data, but to do that in a uniform and consistent way. It is ideal for microservices because, again, it's built on top of the HTTP protocol, on top of REST and JSON, so any modern application framework can interact with it in any way. It's built on top of OAuth 2, based on what Google created a long time ago, but now it has been completely standardized by the Cloud Native Foundation, and it's easy to use in message flows, because the intention is that whenever you have an application that interacts with an OpenID Connect authentication authorization solution, you will interact with a base of flows. Either you get a read client flow where you are requesting client information in behalf of an application, or you are interacting with an API and you need to call and extract the data that an API is exposing in order to get the data that you need. So, we are talking about Microprofile, and just to give you the quick summary, Microprofile was initially conceived for microservices. The idea was to design a friendly developer stack that you could use in order to develop applications quickly, like what Spring does. But the idea was to do that in the Jakarta world, where originally in the beginning, when it was Java Enterprise Edition, it was super slow in order for you to start coding applications in the way that you intended. And then Microprofile was born in order to fill that gap. And nowadays, with the advent of Jakarta and Jakarta being also owned by the Eclipse Foundation, it has diminished this role because Microprofile is still heavily used. and it's still heavily oriented towards microservices and cloud-native applications. But the intention is that you will use it in tandem with Jakarta EE and other cloud-friendly technologies. So the main part of Microprofile that we're interested in is Microprofile JWT, which is a specification within Microprofile that states how applications need to be coded in order to interact with an OpenID solution, in this case, Okta, which I will show you, and how to properly manage role-based access control. What is of interest is that Microprofile states how a service needs to be coded in order for other applications to call that service, and how they need to extract the data of that service in order to validate if the user has access or has permissions to execute certain operations, which is just RBAC, role-based access control, whether a user belongs to a role or a group. And it's a three-parter, because the intention is you introspect the caller's identity, you see, oh, this user is the one that is executing the call. Then you validate it, but the one that does that validation is not the service itself, it's the identity provider. So in this case, Okta will tell you whether or not that user is actually who he says he is, or who they say they are. And then access to the resources are verified. So after validating that user identity, that user will have to then cross-reference its either permissions based on roles or groups or whatever you want to call them, and see, oh, this user belongs to the admin group, they can execute an admin operation, or they belong to a less permissive group, they can't execute an operation, and hence you will get a 403 by an HTTP error code. And it has flexible claim validation. The idea is that not all identity providers follow OpenID Connect to the exact same, let's say, degree that you should do, because again, providers take their own flexibilities. Every provider is different. In particular, Microsoft is known to be a bit, let's say, stubborn in how they follow OpenID Connect, especially when you are interacting with applications that use Microsoft Active Directory or Active Directory Federation services. So Microprofile JWT was created with that flexibility in mind as well. Now, in order to showcase all of this, there is a demo that I have created on GitHub. It's up to date. You can clone the project, run it self-contained way. Technically, it uses an Okta tenant that I created for myself, so you will be able to create users, but they will be restricted. But in a way, it lays the groundwork if you want to start testing yourself the technology, or even if you want to use another identity solution. So let's head to the code. And the code of this application is just a Java application using Maven. It's just a simple multi-component project. It has 3 components, 2 services, one which I call session service and another that I will call speaker service. And the details of these services are in here. Technically, it is a conference event management. So if you, for example, would like to organize a Jconf Dev or a local Jconf or not other conferences, even if they are not related to technology, then you could use this application in that way. It has 2 microservices, one that manages the speakers that will talk at the event, and another that will manage the sessions that are held at the event. And it has a 3rd component, which is a single-page application written in JavaScript, standard web modern development, that will host and will use these microservices in order to expose everything as an interface to the end user. It has 3 roles, an admin that can literally do anything. They can create new sessions, view all sessions, delete sessions, view registered speakers, accept speakers into a conference. It has a speaker that can view all their fellow speakers and can register themselves as a speaker. And I know that it doesn't make any sense, but for the purposes of the demo, that's a feature that was created. Pay no mind. And it also has attendees, which are people that just simply want to attend to conferences. They will just simply want to log into the application and say, I will attend to this event. That's it. They don't want the hassle of going through an intensive beta process of the application itself. So to showcase this, let's explore the code of the services. So remember, these services are implemented using Microprofile, and this also use Jakarta EE in the background. So for example, let's open the speaker service. Let me show you Speaker service has a speaker resource, which is just an API endpoint written in JAX-RS, or Jakarta REST Services, which is the new name of the technology. And it just simply exposes an endpoint that allows you to get the data of a speaker based on a parameter, the ID of the speaker, get all data of all the speakers registered in the database, add a new speaker, accept a new speaker, and check these speakers. And you can see that embedded in the code, there are some annotations that are useful. The first one is the roles allowed annotation, which simply allows me to establish which roles are allowed to call this service. See that I haven't configured anything regarding my identity solution. I'm just simply saying which groups are allowed, or roles in this case, are allowed to call my service. And in this case, there are two of them, the admin and the speaker group, or roles. And one of the operations in particular, the accept speaker, it's only available to admins. And overwriting the annotation definition, and in this case, oh, you're not seeing that. Sorry, have to, okay. Now you should be seeing it, actually. Can you see well in the back? It's good? Okay, thank you. So, back to where I was. So, the speaker resource is the class that defines the API endpoint. It just simply, it's a Jakarta REST service endpoint. It has multiple methods for getting this data of a speaker, seeing the data of all speakers, adding a new one, accepting a speaker, and verifying that the speakers exist in the database. Really basic endpoint configuration. And in here, you can see that I'm using the roles allowed annotation to simply state which roles are allowed to call this code. In this case, the roles are admin and speaker. I am nowhere defining these roles other than on my identity provider solution, which will be Okta. And the only interesting thing that I have in here is that the accept speaker method is being overridden by saying, oh, only the admin role can call this operation. That's it, pretty standard solution. Other than that, this application uses persistence, Java persistence or Jakarta persistence. It uses an embedded database whenever I start the microservice. The microservice itself is configured to be run using Payara Micro, which is just a simple jar. And in order to do this, I just simply have configured this Maven plugin, which just simply grabs a version of Payara that I want to run. I am going to run the latest version. And that's it. I configure a port, and that's it. It deploys the application and it starts. So let me show it to you. We'll just simply say, let's run. And in here, in the background, we'll be running this using JDK 17 because it's nice to use the latest things. And well, not exactly the latest because Java 19 is the latest, but the latest on Java long-term release support. So in the meantime, the session service is exactly what you would expect. In here, you can see that the session service as an API endpoint has two, one for registering attendees to the sessions and another for managing the sessions. And they are configured in the exact same way. The admin role is the one that is allowed to just simply manipulate the sessions as we define in the slides. But registering, you can see that it's allowed to attendees. So in this case, any user that is registered as an attendee can call this endpoint, register. That means that they can register themselves for attending a session because that's what we intended originally. So let's go to the session service and let's start it. And let's go here, and you can see that my speaker service has started. When Payara Micro starts, it just simply gives me a nice overview of all the endpoints that I have developed for my application. They are in here. So now let's go and see what Okta is all about. So Okta, it's an identity solution. As I said, you have to pay for it, but you can just simply create a free account. I think it has a limit of up to 100 test users that you can create, and of course it has API rates and limits per day of requests that you want to do, like any other service in the internet. And the interesting things that I have configured in here is that you can see that I have a directory of people. Oh, sorry, let me refresh. Oh, did I lose? Bear with me for a moment. Do we have internet in this room, right? Yeah. It's weird. Okay, let's do the backup. Yeah. A second. Sorry about that. Was connecting to my personal hotspot, so I wanted to hide that from you. Okay, so we're back on track. On Okta, you can see that I have a sample directory of users that I have created. Of course, I am created as the manager and the owner of the account, so I am also an administrator of the service. And I have created a sample administrator. You can see here that I have created a conference manager admin. If I go in the user's identity, you can see that under the groups of this user, I have admin, attendee, and there is a default group that Okta creates that's called everyone. You can change that. It's a default staple of the service. So it's always like that. And the intention is that Okta allows you to configure applications. On the sample tier or the free tier that you create, I think that it allows you only up to 3 applications. It's strictly limited, but again, this is just for testing purposes. But under the applications, you can see that I have configured a sample or a demo single page application. And this is OpenID connected staple. Every application that you are going to secure has an ID, a client ID that you have to supply to the application themselves or the application itself that will authenticate against the service. And now we are going outside the confines of Java. I'm going to show you a bit of the application in JavaScript that I have created for this example. Oh, sorry, go up here. So this application is created Angular 13, if I recall correctly, pretty, self-code that the IDE helps you to do with, Angular toolset. And the intention is that I will show you in here the important part of the application is that whenever you are configuring Okta itself, Okta and many other identity solutions also have development kits on multiple platforms. Okta has one for Java, JavaScript. So the one that I'm using is the JavaScript Angular development module that they have. That means that I can just simply import the objects on the code here. You can see that I'm using an Okta out module and Okta out card. And the intention is that whenever I import the module, I provide a configuration object in here, config.okta. And this configuration object, which is just a simple JSON object, you can see that it has the same ID of the client that I created on the application on the dashboard. And it has an issue, and this is the important part. This is where OpenID connects everything. Whenever you are authenticating applications using OpenID Connect, you have to understand that the services themselves have to verify who issued the tokens. The service or toolset that generated the token has to be verified in every request. And this issuer corresponds to an API endpoint on Okta itself that is mapped to the application in Java that I have created. And you can see that in here. I go to security, I go to API, and Okta creates a default endpoint. I don't care about that one. The one that I care about is the conference endpoint that I created for this demo. This has an audience. Technically, the audience is just a standardized endpoint that you use to identify uniquely that service that you are authenticating. And it will provide me a new issuer ID, a URL. And this URL is the one that I have to provide to my application in here. So you can see oh, my issue is the server that I will go and cross-reference the identity that I have requested. And afterwards, you have to provide a redirect URI. This is just simply a callback URI. This is a staple of OpenID Connect, where after a correct authentication, you will have to go back to. So look that I'm using localhost 4000, which is the standard port that we use for this Angular application that will be running. So let me do that. Let me start this up. I'll keep explaining. And I have to provide a set of scopes. This is another OpenID Connect requirement, a set of basic scopes that you have to provide for the application to obtain a set of claims. By definition, we always use the OpenID scope that will give me all the standard claims of a JSON Web Token, the profile that will give me personal information of the user, as in the first name, the second name, address, country, etc., if you have configured that information on the identity, and the email for the email address. These are standard OpenID Connect scopes. These are not something that I have created for the application. They already exist, and any OpenID Connect provider will have to provide you these scopes by default. You can create your custom scopes, but that's beyond the scope of this. And afterwards, then I just simply have to specify the exchange algorithm for the cryptographic key that will be used to cipher this token. And I'm using PKCE, and I'm just simply configuring this. That's it. That's the only thing that I have to do on my web application to connect this service to Okta. And you can see that, okay, I have 2 sessions. Actually, I do. Okay. Was wondering if you're seeing. Okay. So let me go to localhost. In here, you can see that the application has started. Whenever I log in, you can see that I'm getting redirected to a standard login interface that is provided by Okta. In this case, it maps with the tenant that I'm using. I can change that to use a hostname of my preference. Then I can provide a password. But in this case, I don't remember which identity I'm using. Let me see. 2020. Nope. Yep. Okay, can't remember which one was open. So in this case, I'll have to kill this, and I'll have to log out from here just to test this. Okay, so back to this. Let me log in. Okay, so in this case, you can see that Okta also, this is a feature that they have. This is not a standardized feature, but they have self-registration. That means that the user can create a new account if they wish to. So if I click sign up, you can see that, okay, I can provide an email. I have turned email verification. So if you see me providing a dummy address and you see, oh, why is it not validating that? It's because I turned it down for the demo purposes. Don't fret. So we'll create a test fnd 1 at payara.fish. Then it has standard basic password verification for, password stability and integrity. And that's ND. I'm going to register this. Then it will redirect me back to the application. Now, before that, again, by default, they will ask me some security questions. So let's say, well, no, space invaders. I know that's not a PC game, but technically it qualifies. And I will select an image that I want to reference my account. And hopefully, there we go. It's calling back to my application. Now I have a profile. Everything was authenticated. And let me open the, here, open the console tools in here. Where are they? Developer tools, okay. elements, network, here. So, okay. Whenever I request data from my services, let's see, for example, I want to see the information of the sessions. So you can see, I can see the sessions. What was called in the background? You can see that it's calling this endpoint, all, in this case, and it's passing a token in here. The token is passed in the authorization header as a bearer token, and this token that I have in here, let me see if I can copy it. You can just simply use the JWT page in order to decode the token, because technically it is signed. Anyone can decode it as long as they have the key. Let me paste it in here, and you can see that here is the payload that I got. It is token version 1. I have a user, in this case is the server on Okta that is generating the token. It has an audience. Remember, the audience is the service that I'm authenticating. It has an issue time, it has an expiration time. Once a token expires, you can no longer authenticate using that token. You have to renovate it, a set of basic scopes, an authorization time, the subject, which in this case is the identity of the user that you are validating, and a UPN. This is not a standard claim of OpenID Connect. This is something that was created for Microprofile in order to correctly identify the user if in the case the standard subject claim is not enough. So it is seen as a complementary. In this case, the UPN is the internal Okta ID that is generated for the entity, and the groups that this user belongs to. In this case, everyone and attendee. And this token is passed over to the server, and the server validates that. But you will wonder, how are the services validating the token? I just only show you on the code how the services were authorized, but not how to authenticate. Well, that is done in a simple manner using system properties. So on the speaker service itself, I will show you both ways on how this is done. Give me a second. On the speaker service, oh no, it's on the session service actually. Okay. So on the session service, you can see that when I run in Payara Micro, I'm just simply passing over Java system properties. And I'm passing these system properties, MP, JWT, verify public key location, verify user, and verify audiences. And these are 3 standardized microprofile configuration properties that you have to point out. This one, the first, is the location that your identity solution provides for the public key that we'll use in order to verify the signature of the token. This is a standard one. It will basically be the name of your, or the host name or the URL of your Okta tenant, and then the ID of the application that is being authenticated, B1 keys. I think B2 is still not open. The issue, it's exactly the same configuration that I showed you on the JavaScript application configuration, and the audience is the server that we are authenticating to. And in this case, it's the API conference.payara.fish, exactly the same service. The speaker service, on the other hand, is not using system properties. It's using a standard file named, microprofile config properties. And this is just a Java properties file that it contains exactly the same configuration properties. If you wonder, well, how do I do that on a Docker container or on Kubernetes or on something that doesn't have access to these files? Well, you can use environment variables, Kubernetes secrets, or configuration directories, and whatever suits you. The standard is fully flexible with these configuration sources. Important thing is that the service itself doesn't do any authentication or authorization. You haven't seen any code that grabs the identity, that encrypts or decrypts a password, that validates, nothing. All of that is handled by the identity solution. The service itself is only concerned with verifying with the user, are these tokens valid? Okay, now that I know that, I will go and check if these users are authorized. And the service itself is only tasked with validating that authorization. Everything else is done for you because it has been outsourced in a sense. So back to the slides. See the slides? Okay, cool. Very well done. Okay, so to finalize, in summary, all Okta will allow you to delegate user management and authentication. None of that was done in the applications. The applications are just simply concerned with integrating everything. Simplify the authentication workflow in applications, because the workflow itself is managed by the identity solution, and remove security complexity from microservices. Instead of worrying about whether or not you're properly securing passwords or properly sanitizing user identities, or making sure that, are my identities or are the identities of my users properly stored in a way that I don't have to worry every night when I go to sleep about them? You don't do that. You are outsourcing all of that to an identity solution. Whether or not you pay for that identity solution or you maintain that solution yourself in another, let's say, infrastructure, that's up to you, but that's your decision. The services themselves and its developers don't worry about it. They just simply focus on the business, and that's it. And Microprofile, JSON Web Token will allow you to plug in an existing Okta domain via configuration properties, not to worry about token validation algorithms, and focus on setting all role constraints to existing services. The only thing that the service cares about, again, as I said, is just making sure that every user is properly constrained within the role of the operation that they want to call. Okay, so this is standard lookup for Payara Global Meetup. If you want to know more, please go to our booth tomorrow. We're happy to touch about this with you. So any questions that you guys have? Nope? Okay. Thank you.